Today, we're going to talk about something so fundamental to our lives that, honestly, we probably take it for granted: democratic rights. But these aren't just some dry legal terms you'd find in a textbook. They are the invisible shields that protect our dignity. They define our lives, and they draw a clear line in the sand against absolute power. So let's dive in and explore what that really means. To really get why rights matter so much, I want to start with this letter. It's from a 9-year-old boy, Anas, whose father was being held in Guantanamo Bay. His simple, absolutely heartbreaking question just cuts right to the heart of it all. What happens when the rules just don't apply? What does a world without these basic guarantees actually look like? And the tragic thing is, Anas's story isn't a one-off. To truly understand what rights are, we first have to see what life is like when they're gone. So we're going to look at 3 very different and very real examples that show what happens when these fundamental guarantees are just stripped away. First up, let's go back to the place Anas's father was held, Guantanamo Bay. This case is a stark example of what can happen when a powerful government holds people from other countries in what is essentially a legal black hole, completely outside of any recognizable system of justice.
I mean, just think about the total collapse of any kind of process here. About 600 people were picked up in secret. They were slapped with the label enemies, but never got a trial, never got their day in court. Can you imagine your family not even knowing where you are? With no media, no UN representatives, nobody allowed to see you. And on top of all that, there were reports of torture, methods that actually violated America's own laws. This wasn't just a failure of justice, it was a complete and total absence of it.
Okay, so the Guantanamo case. That's about one country denying rights to citizens of another country. But what happens when a government denies rights to its own people? For that, let's turn to the situation in Saudi Arabia. In an absolute monarchy, the entire power structure is just completely different. The rulers inherit their position, they aren't elected, and that means ordinary citizens have no say, no way to change things through politics. You can't form your own political parties, the media can't report anything the monarch doesn't like, even personal belief is policed. And this control runs deep into society with really severe restrictions on women, to the point where, in a court of law, the testimony of one man is officially considered equal to that of 2 women. It's a system where rights aren't something you're born with, they're just privileges that a ruler can grant or take away. All right, so we've looked at a foreign government, we've looked at a monarchy, but honestly, maybe the most chilling scenario of all is when a government that was democratically elected turns on its own citizens. And this brings us to our final and tragic example, the ethnic massacre in Kosovo back in the late 1990s. So to understand this, the context is everything. Ethnic Albanians were the majority in their home province of Kosovo, but they were a minority within the country as a whole. When a Serb nationalist won the national election, his government became openly hostile to them. And the terrifying result was a campaign of ethnic cleansing, a massacre, carried out not by some invading force, but by their own country's military. Think about that. The very army meant to protect them was ordered to attack them by a leader they had helped elect. The human cost? Well, it was just staggering. Listen to this account from a 74-year-old woman named Batisha Haksha. She watched soldiers shoot her husband and then burn her house to the ground. She was left with, in her own words, no house, no husband, no possessions, just everything gone. And for thousands and thousands of people, this was their new reality. So, after hearing these stories, the prisoner in Guantanamo, the citizen in Saudi Arabia, the family in Kosovo, I want you to just take a second, really try to put yourself in their shoes. If that were you, what would you have wished for? What is the one thing that could have protected you? You'd wish for a system, right? A system that guaranteed your security, your dignity, your fair treatment. A system where you couldn't just be locked away or silenced or attacked. Well, that system, that fundamental assurance, that is built on the concept of rights. So what is a right, really? It's not just a wish or a moral high ground. It's a specific kind of claim, a claim you can make on other people, on society, and most critically, on the government itself. It's a demand for a basic standard of life, free from fear and humiliation. But, and this is the key part, for that claim to actually have any power, it needs a few essential ingredients. Yeah, a simple wish doesn't just magically become a right just because we say it is. For any claim to have any real power, it has to be built on three absolutely essential pillars. First up, the claim has to be reasonable. You can't claim a right that harms someone else or that can't possibly be granted to everybody equally. Second, it has to be recognized by society. The community around you has to generally agree that, yes, this is a fair and just claim. But here is the absolute game changer, the third pillar. It must be sanctioned by law. The moment a claim is written into law, it stops being just a good idea and becomes an enforceable guarantee that you can actually take to court.
Okay, so this brings us to the really big question. Why is this whole framework, this idea of legally backed rights, so non-negotiable for a democracy to even work?
Well, think about it. A democracy without rights, it's really just a system where the majority rules, and they can easily oppress the minority, just like we saw in Kosovo. Government power is unlimited, but with rights, you get protection. You get real limits on what a government can do. You get the freedom to speak up, to criticize, to form parties, and to actually participate in your own governance. Rights are basically the guardrails of democracy. So the main takeaway here is this. Rights aren't some nice-to-have, optional extra. They are the absolute lifeblood of a democracy. They are what protect the minority from the tyranny of the majority. You can think of them as an emergency brake. They're the guarantees we can all use when things go wrong and power is being abused. So, what's the bottom line in all this? The simplest way, and maybe the best way, to think about rights is as a shield. It's a shield for every single individual citizen, protecting them from the most powerful forces in society, and that especially includes their own government. And for that shield to really truly work, it means something incredibly important. Some rights have to be placed above the government. They have to be so fundamental that no government, not even one you voted for, has the power to simply take them away. And that right there is precisely why most democracies write these core rights down in their constitution. By calling them fundamental rights and carving them into the country's highest law, they are made permanent and are protected from the political moods and whims of the day. And all of this leaves us with one last crucial question. If these fundamental rights are our guarantees against the government, what happens when the government itself is the one breaking the rules? Who holds them accountable? Well, answering that question, that is the constant, vital challenge at the very heart of any real democracy.